Hey everyone, welcome to today's episode of Eat Your Feelings. My name's Sparrow Spalding, and today we're going to be making an amazing corn chowder. Healthy version, of course. Now, I grew up in New England eating corn chowder and, of course, loved it so much. And so I wanted to, just sort of adapt the recipe that my mom made, make it a little more flavorful and also a lot healthier. So let's get started. I'm starting with some organic chicken broth. If you're on a low sodium diet, go ahead and use low sodium, or you can go ahead and use bone broth. Gives it a little extra protein as well. Now, I pulverized some onion, about a medium-sized onion, and I've got it started here cooking. I'm going to go ahead and add the corn. Now, this is about 2 cups of fresh corn. I just cut it right off the cob, and I make sure and buy non-GMO. So a lot of people say, oh, you should buy local. I don't always buy local produce because it's still filled with pesticides, and a lot of times it's genetically modified. So I make sure and get organic non-GMO corn, and you can actually tell the difference. It just tastes better. And, it doesn't have all the pesticides, all the chemicals. This isn't going to take very long to cook. I like to put a lid on this and turn it down. I normally don't put water in, but I'll keep an eye on it, and I'll add a little bit if I need to. So I've got the broth heating, and I already cooked the potatoes. Now, I used probably 9 or 10 organic red potatoes. And I like using red potatoes because they're a little lower on the glycemic index than a russet potato. So what that means is they won't spike your blood sugar as much as a white potato or a yellow russet potato. So I'm looking at these potatoes, and I think what I'm going to do is cut them up a little bit. I like them smaller size chunks so that it cooks down in the soup pretty nicely. So while I'm chopping these, I just wanted to mention that I just watched the Martha Stewart documentary on Netflix the other day, and boy, was I blown away. Now, I've always been a Martha Stewart fan. My gosh, for as long as I can remember. I just loved how she knew how to do everything, and she made everything look pretty and tasteful. And I remember being a poor, starving college student with not a lot of money, but yet I could follow her advice and still make my food taste good and still have a nice presentation, even though I was on pretty much a shoestring budget. So I really appreciated that about her. But getting to know her behind the scenes in the documentary, hearing about her family, how she grew up, I was a little bit surprised. I mean, not surprised, but maybe saddened is the word, that she grew up with a pretty authoritative father who was rather cold. I mean, she didn't have a horrible family life that she had said, but her dad was really hard on her and her siblings, even though I think she was the favorite. And I know what that can be like. So, it sounds like he really instilled a drive in her. But it also sounds like her ambitions and her drive sort of outshined her need for family and connection. And that made me think of trauma survivors and how a lot of times, we just get so focused on surviving that other things just take a back seat. I thought it was also interesting too that she had mentioned cheating on her spouse, her, I think, one and only husband. And she kind of dismissed it. She was like, oh yeah, it was nothing. But, then you found out he was cheating. And then you're like, well, and then he says, well, he only cheated after she cheated, but who knows the true story? She denies that. And it just made me think about how much sometimes people put on a brave face because she said, her business was taking off and everyone thought she was the perfect, homemaker, wife. They had the perfect family. They lived in that beautiful home. But yet behind the scenes, things were really crumbling. And then she mentioned that she didn't want the divorce, that he had found somebody else. And she even shared some personal letters she had written to him. And I was really surprised at those. They were quite emotional. And then, of course, it talked about her jail time and being convicted of insider trading. Okay, pause. I'm going to go ahead and add these potatoes. I chopped them up pretty well. I think this is going to work. So I'm going to add these to the broth. I've got these little corn stalk things, little corn silks everywhere. That's going to drive me nuts. All right, so let's check on our veggies here. Yeah, they're looking pretty good. The water's cooking out of them really nicely. So we'll add those in a bit. Now, corn chowder, of course, is creamy, right? And it's milk-based. So I'm going to use a little bit of rice milk, about a cup. I'm going to go ahead and add that in now. Most of my cooking is pretty dairy-free. I am going to put in a little bit of butter. This is organic grass-fed butter, only 2 tablespoons. Just enough to give it a bit of a flavor. The other thing I'm going to add for flavor is some bacon bits. Now this is 2 strips of bacon, all natural, uncured, no nitrates. So about as healthy as you can get for bacon. Okay, stir that up. Great. So back to Martha. Oh my goodness. Yeah, so I thought long and hard about, what would I do if someone called me and said, hey, this person is selling their stock, you should sell yours. And this is the person who I think owned the company. And I think probably most of us would go, yeah, go ahead and sell and not even think twice about it. And that's what happened to her, it seems like. And, then they really made an example out of her. She went to prison for 5 months. And, it was just really tragic and sad to watch. It made me think about how many people, as they rise to the top, they, become more and more impervious. And then sometimes they become, I don't want to say more rude, or maybe they take their lifestyle for granted. And then, somebody wants to, they get to the top, they rise to the top, and somebody wants to knock them off. And, I wondered how much of that dynamic played into her being indicted, her jail time, etc. But besides the point, at that point, it looks like she had to sell her company. She never really quite bounced back to where she was before. Don't get me wrong, she's still doing amazing. But life changed for her after that. And she talked a bit about what it was like being in prison. And even though it was, not maximum security or anything like that, they did have a bit of a garden. They had a library, they had some things to do besides sitting in a jail cell all day. But still, it sounds like it was pretty rough. One thing she did note was how awful prison food is. And, I don't think that has changed. And me as a nutritionist, my goodness, I think everyone should have access to healthy foods. And she said all the foods in jail were processed, heavy carbohydrate, heavy fat content, and just nothing really healthy, nothing fresh. And, I think about people that are incarcerated for years upon years, living that way, eating that way, and what that would probably do to the body. But then I think about the average person not incarcerated, and the average person also eats that way a large majority of the time. And then we look around and we go, wow, where's all this disease coming from? But, when we think about it, how are we not having disease with the things that we eat? So that's why I like to focus on fresh ingredients. Now, this soup is, in my opinion, it's a treat. Would I eat it on my 30-day detox plan? No, I probably wouldn't because of the bacon. And it's got a little bit of butter. I mean, not a lot. I'm a big fan of using a little bit of butter. I don't like using oils in my food, but some saturated fats like butter, avocado oil, some coconut oil, I think are much healthier than things like seed oils, canola oil, soybean, corn, all of the Crisco, my goodness, those kinds of things. So, but yeah, I mean, I guess you could eat this. It's not on my 30-day detox, but you could eat it on my weight loss plan. I just wouldn't eat it very often. All right, I think this is about done. It's looking really good. So I'm gonna dump this in. Now, Martha's food, of course, I love her recipes, but normally what I do is alter them a bit because they do tend to have more fat and calories and carbohydrates than I like to eat. But also, you know, she's not cooking to prevent disease. She's cooking to make her food taste and look amazing, and she's great at it. This soup, by the way, is still very low in fat and calories. 2 tablespoons of butter for a whole pot of soup is not very much. Now at this point, I am going to add some fresh thyme. Not a lot, just a little bit. Smells so wonderful. I love fresh herbs. I grew a lot of basil this summer. I grew regular basil and then Thai basil, and I loved them both. I grew rosemary. The thyme didn't do as well as I'd liked, so I buy it, but that's okay. Now, a good friend of mine just went to Portugal and she brought me back some salt. So I'm excited to use this today. Just a little. There we go. I'm going to use some spices here. I'm going to use a little onion powder. Just a couple dashes. I'm going to use some garlic powder. And I'm going to use some organic crushed red pepper. This is a staple for me in the kitchen because we like a little spice in this house. So I'm not going to use a lot because it's chowder, just a little. Here we go. I'm going to turn it up just a little. It was on 2. I'm going to turn it up to about a 4. And sometimes I cover my soups, but I'm not going to cover this one. And it smells great, you guys. So back to Martha. Yeah, well, she's in her 80s now. And look at the woman. I mean, she has done everything. Oh, one other thing that I wanted to share was, I guess she had a long-term boyfriend. I can't remember, but I think his name is Steve. And he really didn't visit her much in prison. And then one day he just said, oh yeah, by the way, I'm marrying somebody else. And I was like, ooh, you could tell it really hurt her. And I just thought, you know, that's something like you would see on an episode of Sex and the City. That's not something somebody should tell you in real life while they're in bed with you. It sounds like it was like just after some lovey-dovey time. Then he says, oh yeah, by the way, I'm marrying so-and-so. Oh my gosh. And this is Martha Stewart. I mean, who in the heck is she hanging out with? But very successful man, longtime boyfriend, and you know, I guess maybe he just had a sense of entitlement. I don't know, but or a lack of empathy. How crazy. But anyway, my assessment after watching the documentary is that I think Martha is a deep feeler, but she keeps her feelings locked away. I think There's so much going on inside of her. And I think that's why she comes across as aloof or sometimes even a little tightly wound. You can tell the woman has amazingly high expectations. And some of the behind the scenes footage, you can tell that, other people don't really live up to her expectations. But, she's just sort of in a world of her own. And I imagine it would be difficult to live up to her expectations. But anyway, I think she is a deep feeler, and I think maybe she doesn't always know what to do with all of that. And so she channels it into her cooking and her entertaining and her growing things. She grows trees, she raises chickens, she raises all kinds of animals, plants, gardens, flowers, all of it. And I think what that tells me about her, and again, this is just my assessment, I don't know Martha Stewart, but what I think it tells me is that she's got some trauma. And a lot of times, people who are traumatized, we do express ourselves through our creativity. She's one of the most creative people on the planet, my goodness. But does she really talk about feelings? No, but you can tell who she is and how she feels by looking at her creations. They're just astoundingly beautiful and amazing. I'm a big fan. I recommend it. And what I loved about the film was that it also made me reflect on my life. Like, hey, what ways am I like Martha? In what ways am I perfectionistic? In what ways do I have high expectations? In what ways do I want to do everything all at once, right? She's one of the few people who can pull it off. The average person, we can't really pull off all of that at once. But it did make me reflect on myself. It's a great movie, especially if you're a Martha Stewart fan. So highly recommend. Anyway, let's get back to our soup. This is really looking good. Now, I might need to thicken this up a bit. Now it's going to cook down for a while, but I'm thinking I need to thicken it up. Now, there's a couple of things that you can do. You can beat an egg, whip up an egg, and then stir it in slowly on low heat so that it doesn't curl. And sometimes that'll make it really thick and creamy. Today, I'm going to use just a little bit of white rice flour. Let's see here. Now, a lot of people might use regular flour, but I'm a gluten-free cook and nutritionist. So I'm using rice flour. Not a lot. This is less than a tablespoon. There we go. That's another reason I don't include this on my detox plan, because there is no flour on my 30-day detox. And if you're feeling like you want to detox, click the link below. Check it out. It's pretty amazing. There's another one of those corn silks. Like I said, they're going to drive me nuts. All right. So this is going to take a while to cook, but I'm going to give it just a little taste and see what it's missing. It's delicious. I think I'm going to put a little black pepper. And a little more salt. Actually, I want to use this Portugal salt. Flor de sal, davvero. It's almost got like a stickiness to it. It feels very fresh. So back to Martha and the whole movie. Again, just thinking about yourself. Where are you perfectionistic? Where do other people not meet your expectations? I think it's always really important to assess that in life, because it could be your kids, it could be your spouse, it could be a coworker or a boss, it could be a sibling, it could be a friend, it could be anyone, it could be your dog. But thinking about where you might need to dial back your expectations. Sometimes our expectations are actually too low, where you need to maybe set some boundaries and raise your expectations. I don't know, but at the end of the day, I love films and I love biographies about people that make me also reflect on me and where I can grow as a person. And that was really helpful because sometimes, especially trauma survivors, we do have high expectations because things were so bad for so long. Or, you know, if we grew up in dysfunctional families and we have complex PTSD, then a lot of times, you know, we can be easily annoyed or offended, or sometimes we can even become hair triggers because we want things perfect now because for so long they were imperfect. On our healing journeys, it's so important to continue to assess and to talk about these things with a friend, with your spouse, with a counselor, with people in your community, so that we are continuously growing and learning and getting healthy, right? Not just with our foods, but with our emotions. And we can still eat our feelings. It's just we're going to eat healthy food, right? Healthy food. This looks amazing. All right, let's check this out. I think we're done. I think we're ready. All righty. That's a good start. A healthy New England corn chowder. Let's give it a try. It's truly delicious. And using the fresh corn gives it an extra sweetness. I think you'll really enjoy it. So guys, as always, hug yourself from me. Be sure to subscribe to my page and we'll see you next time.